I don't know how I'm going to work this into the show, but when you go to a zoo, just ask for the naked mole rat exhibit. They smell horrible, by the way. And they are naked. I mean, they're hairless, and they smell, I think it was them that smelled pretty bad, yeah. It could have been something else in the zoo. I don't know, Dana. Everything in the zoo smells bad.
Welcome to Damn It, Jim, the podcast. A fun and fascinating look at the movies of Star Trek from the original series. My name is Dana Smith, and once again, I'm sitting in the captain's chair to guide us through this film. And as always, I'm joined by your favorite Supreme Vice Admiral of Jocularity, Dan Calzaretta. Good evening, Your Supremeness.
Wait, is that a promotion? It sounds like a promotion.
Yeah, I added another adjective in there.
So this is not a real thing. It's a made-up thing.
Yeah, but you know, it's our make-believe world. We can do whatever we want. So.
Just like my life, Dana. Just like my life. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I like the jocularity part. That was nice.
Yeah, well, I thought it was better than Purveyor of Doom or something. I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't remember that one, but maybe.
No, you had one that was kind of a darker name.
Uranus. I think it was Uranus.
That was last week.
That was a dark brown name.
Oh, my God. That's a stain on our show.
Well, how are you doing, Dana? How was your week?
Oh, it's been quite interesting. So never a dull moment. Lots going on.
Yeah. See, when you work, that's kind of what happens.
So you weren't working. You took off, went to the Oregon coast?
Yes, we did. It was 107 degrees in Walla Walla, and it was 60 degrees on the Oregon coast.
Wow.
It was great.
You look like you got a little sun.
Oh, I fell asleep kind of in a chair holding a beer. Thankfully, I didn't drop the beer. And it was overcast. That's the thing. It was kind of overcast. And I woke up and I was like, oh, my God, I've got, radiation sickness or something, whatever Spock had when he was stuck in the engine room or wherever the hell that was.
When he saved the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And all you did was save the beer.
I did save the beer. Maybe we should get into the listener comments there, Dana.
So Dan, on Facebook, Frederick Klein commented on our post about the Wrath of Khan, and he said, revenge is a dish best served cold, taken from book titled 1001 Klingon Proverbs, where we also read, dairy borscht is a dish best served with sour cream.
That's true, though. It's absolutely true.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was in the Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union at the time. And we went and got borscht. It was at a little cafeteria that we read about in a book, pre-internet, read about in a book. And it was in like the basement of the Olympic Stadium in Moscow that was in total disrepair because, the Olympics had been there like, 1980, I think, something like that. The borscht was great, though.
I've never had borscht. It's like beet soup, isn't it?
Beets and, usually there's some kind of meat in there. Could be, beef, could be possum. It really could be anything. Yeah, if you don't like beets, you're not going to like borscht. That's for sure.
No matter how much sour cream you pile on.
No matter how much. In Russia, I eat borscht until poop come out red.
You know what I figured about Chekhov that's hard to do? He's got a certain higher pitch, and that I try to match that pitch, and that throws off everything.
Well, you got to grab the nuts kind of hard. Then you get up there. In Russia, it's all about grabbing nuts.
So anyway.
Yeah, anyway, back to the listener comment. Already, one listener comment about borscht, and we're off on a 15-minute thing about whatever. Food and nuts. I don't know.
So our new friend Roxy Ray said, this was a fun podcast this week. Roxy, they're all fun.
In our own mind.
And she says, confession time. I was working on my church's August newsletter while listening to this podcast and the Wrath of Khan. So in a way, y'all was doing God's work.
Tina, I can only hope that Roxy had earphones in and wasn't just blasting it throughout the entire show.
Yeah, blasting through her phone or through the computer speakers, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm not sure that would go over very well.
She said, this is one of my favorite Trek films. McCoy gets a big part in it. It's always good when Bones gets pithy comments.
True.
Tim Moses said, great review as always. I remember walking out of the theater so devastated that they blew up the Enterprise. I couldn't even speak.
People wish that would happen to us.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be able to speak because their throats would be too sore from screaming and joy. So Zoom Kwan, we haven't heard from in a while, says, so is Carol Marcus that cute lab technician Kirk almost married, as mentioned by Gary Mitchell in Where No Man Has Gone Before? Great podcast and the greatest of Trek movies. I think that's, he was talking about Wrath of Khan.
And our podcast.
So you might remember in the Facebook post for Star Trek 3, I said that you commented that Kirk looked like he'd put on some weight.
Yeah.
And K-Man said, not to be a downer, but I don't think we care whether Kirk put on weight. It starts to sound like an Oprah show. And that's what we're aiming for, though, is to get our own show like Oprah.
Yeah, I'd like every listener to look under their seat right now, and you will find a package of North Shore adult diapers.
And finally, our old friend Lou from Canada said, this felt like an episode rather than a movie, referring to Star Trek 3, the best odd-numbered movie of the list. So, Dan, do you have any comments or phone calls to share?
Yeah, Dana, I do. Dave Rutan sent an email about our review of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. He says the alien in the bar scene, remember you called him like catfish guy?
Yeah.
So he says that alien, the catfish guy in the bar scene talking to McCoy doesn't say, I here am new. He actually says, I here am whom? See, Dana?
Oh, wow.
I know. It is all my fault, really. Well, it's not my fault. We all know whose fault it is, but I'm not going to go there because I'm not going to rant.
Good. Be a first.
Yeah. JD Lewis is also back, Dana.
Sweet.
Yeah, JD says about our review of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Wonderful reaction today. I love the film's callback to Let That Be Your Last Battlefield with the self-destruct sequence. Nichelle Nichols shines with the very little time she was allotted. Also, some sympathetic kudos to Robin Curtis for doing her best to attempt the totally thankless task of replacing fan favorite Kirstie Alley. And then JD says, fun fact. This is good. We haven't had one in a while.
Yeah.
The screams of young adult Spock were performed by voiceover artist Frank Welker, a.k.a. Freddy from Scooby-Doo.
Wow.
Where does he get this stuff? It's awesome. He's got like an inside track somehow. JD then goes on and says, I look forward to your future reactions. Have a wonderful week in the meantime. Thanks for that, JD.
Yeah, thanks, JD. That was awesome.
We heard from Comrade Wireless Caller. We haven't heard from this guy in a while, who watched and commented on some earlier episodes, including The Way to Eden. They said, this had to be your most utterly hilarious TOS review ever. Greg Berg wrote about how I found the 2 death scenes in Star Trek The Search for Spock not very emotional. He wrote, I actually disagree with you. I think David's murder was gruesome, and the savage rapidity of it made it seem all the more brutal. There was something very real and raw about it. As for the death of the Enterprise, I found that to be profoundly moving, and every Star Trek fan I've ever talked to feels the same. Well, thanks, Greg, for your comments. I do wonder, though, are you an English professor by any chance? Finally, Tuning Sport commented on the fact that I put a clip from Let's Hear It for the Boy in last week's podcast. They say, I just want to tell you that I still have Let's Hear It for the Boy playing in my head. And then he added a very angry swearing emoji at the end of his message.
Yeah, I didn't know you were actually going to put that in. I thought you were just joking when you said that, and then you put it in during editing, of course. And I almost drove off the road when I was listening to it. So,
yeah, that's all I got for this week, Dana.
Well, great. Well, thanks for everybody who wrote in. And again, we do have a phone number. Dan, what is that phone number? Should somebody want to call and leave a message?
Yeah, the number for the Damn It Jim hotline is 509-676-6298. And in case you didn't have a chance to write that down, you will find that phone number in the show notes.
Now on to Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. I mean home.
You f***ing bastard.
So, Dan, right away, it's a different movie. The music score is very light, kind of upbeat.
Yeah.
There's still the bit of the Star Trek theme running through it. I noticed it right away, more than I think I ever have, that how different the music score is.
I did too, and I did not like it.
Yeah, it kind of threw me off a little bit. So we see this long cylindrical tube moving through space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's It kind of looks like it's a rock almost. I mean, it's really hard. It's got this one ball.
Just one.
That's
one,
just
Dana.
kind of gyrating outside of it. So on its own.
Okay, how am I going to edit that? How?
I don't know how else to describe this.
No, I mean, that's exactly accurate. I mean, what you're saying, yeah, exactly accurate.
So we see the USS Saratoga, and the captain reports that they have been trying to communicate with this object with no luck.
I mean, how do you communicate with something like that? You know what I mean?
And then next we see the Klingon ambassador. He calls Kirk the devil and blames him for the death of multiple Klingons.
Well, true.
It's like a Federation Council meeting. There's all kinds of aliens in the audience and stuff.
Yeah.
And the Federation ambassador says Kirk is charged with 9 violations of Starfleet regulations. Kind of surprised it's only 9.
Yeah, me too. I mean, look, if they're going to charge him, go back a few years and that list would be a lot longer.
The Klingon ambassador's not happy, and he says there shall be no peace as long as Kirk lives. And the Klingon ambassador storms out of the council. So then we get Captain's log, stardate 8390. And we go to the planet Vulcan. We're in the 3rd month of our Vulcan exile. It was Dr. McCoy, with a fine sense of historical irony, who decided on a name for our captured Klingon vessel. And we see on the side of the bird of prey, they've painted, rather crudely, HMS Bounty.
Now, that was the Captain Bligh ship?
Fletcher Christian.
Which is a true story.
Yes.
But I guess there are still people on Pitcairn Island that are descendants of, who is it? Hans Christian Andersen? Was that his name again?
Fletcher Christian.
Yeah, that guy.
Actually, they say something like half the island is related to him.
Yeah.
He must have propagated the species there.
Well, he was just like Kirk.
Yeah.
Talk about space seed.
Sea seed.
Sea seed.
By the way, I think the bird of prey
Yeah.
looked great. Kind of was like a dull lime green, and the bird painting on the bottom was brighter and stuff. I thought it looked really cool with the backdrop of Vulcan.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't know they were so small, tiny compared to the Enterprise.
And they refer to it in Star Trek 3 as a scout ship. I think they had 9 guys on it.
Yeah.
So we see Sulu, Chekhov, Scotty, Uhura, and McCoy are all standing by the ship, and Kirk goes down the line, and they all agree to return to Earth to face their trial. So next we see Spock enter a room. There's these computer screens, and he goes through some tests.
Yeah, it was kind of like some type of maybe test to see how his memory was after being dead or kind of dead or whatever he was.
Yeah, and having it stored in McCoy's brain for a while, it couldn't have helped it.
Oh, God, no.
And then finally the computer asks, "How are you feeling?" And this stops him, and he's looking at it, and he's really confused by this. And his mother comes in.
Yeah.
And talks to him about what it means to be human.
Played by the same character who was in one of the episodes, right?
Yeah. And so Spock says, humans make illogical decisions. At Starfleet Command, they report that this alien entity is heading right towards Earth.
No, not towards Earth, Dana.
Where else do alien entities go towards?
Yeah, just right towards the planet. Yep.
Back on Vulcan, they ready the bird of prey. Chekhov reports the cloaking device is now available on all flight modes.
Is that forward, reverse? What are the other flight modes?
Yeah, smoking, non-smoking. It's just...
You would think on a Klingon ship it's all smoking all the time.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. Really nasty something that they're, like the dung of that dog that was on the ship in the earlier movie,
Oof. Yeah. Scotty says he has replaced the Klingon food packs. They were giving him sour stomach. And it's kind of funny. Kirk goes, "Oh, that's what that was."
There are a lot of good lines in this movie, and you have to kind of be listening for them, it seems like.
And then Saavik is there, and she kind of tells Kirk that his son, David, died heroically.
Yeah, she told him last movie, Dana. Is she just trying to rub it in at this point?
Well, she says, "I've never really had the chance to tell you." It's like, well, fuck, they've been around for 3 months on this, planet. What has she been doing?
And she did tell him in the previous movie. So, Dana, when I saw the scene, I thought Saavik was going to be in the movie. But that was all Saavik was in the movie, just that one tiny scene.
So McCoy comes up to Kirk and points out that it might not be a great idea to have Spock on board. And Kirk asks why, and McCoy says, "I don't know if you got the whole picture, but he isn't exactly working on all thrusters. Kirk kind of looks around and goes, oh, come back to him. So I don't know if you noticed, but didn't Kirk's hair look darker?
Yes, it did, Dana. I think maybe the hair was darker because he was doing TJ Hooker, and I think he had darker hair in that show.
Yeah. I was thinking he found a nice Vulcan hairstylist that was able to darken his hair for him so he didn't feel as old.
Sure, yeah.
So the entity gets closer to Earth, and we see it seems to affect the ocean. I couldn't tell if there's like a ray coming down, but it looked like something like the oceans were being parted almost.
Yeah, it was the Moses effect, Dana.
Yeah. So back on the Bounty, or the bird of prey, Chekhov reports there are no Federation vessels.
I think he would say whistles. Whistles.
Chekhov reports there are no Federation vessels.
That's pretty good.
Whew, I'm exhausted.
And I want some borscht, please, with the sour cream.
Uhura says there's a lot of chatter on the airwaves, but it's hard to make sense of it. And so McCoy sits down next to Spock and says, well, I just wanted to say it sure is nice to have your Katra back in your head, not mine. And McCoy says, come on, Spock, it's me, McCoy. You really have gone where no man has gone before. Can't you tell me what it felt like? And Spock says it would be impossible to discuss the subject without a common frame of reference. And McCoy like, you're joking. He goes, you mean I have to die to discuss your insights on death?
Actually, that'd be, yeah, good. Yeah, you should, yeah.
Why don't you go try it? We'll revive you. Sure. Trust us. And so Spock says, forgive me, Doctor. I am receiving a number of distress calls. And McCoy says, I don't doubt it.
The line, you really have gone where no man has gone before, that is a really interesting line to put in the film, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that they're kind of self-referencing, which I thought was just kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I thought it was good. So we go back to Earth. This thing is stirring up the oceans now. Clouds are turning. We see the clouds, they report that clouds are covering about 78% of the planet. And Sarek is there with the Federation president, and he suggests a planetary distress call. So on the Bounty, they see this distress call. Uhura patches it in, and the Federation president says, avoid the planet Earth at all costs. So Kirk orders that they listen to the transmission, and they hear this sound that has been going on since we saw the entity.
That kind of high-pitched electronic kind of weirdness.
And Spock says, an unknown form of energy of great power and intelligence. This fits right in with the series because everything they ran into was a great power and intelligence.
Yeah.
And he says, I find it is illogical that its intentions could be hostile. And McCoy goes, well, damn it, you think this is its way of saying hi there to the people of Earth? And Spock says, there are other forms of intelligence on Earth, Doctor.
And you're not one of those forms of intelligence, Doctor.
Yeah.
So let's have that conversation about you dying again.
So Kirk's like, you're suggesting the transmission is meant for life form other than man?
It was, this whole scene was just one leap to another. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Kirk asks Uhura to modify the sound for being in water.
And salt water. Not just water, salt water. He was very clear about that.
So after some work, she's filling around with the dials and stuff. Spock says, if I'm right, there can be no answer for this message. And Spock goes off to a computer screen and says, just as I suspected, the probe's transmission is a song. And on the screen, you're seeing like images flipping and different types of fish and stuff. And finally, you land on humpback whales. And he says, humpback whales. They've been extinct since the 21st century. Kirk says then they have to attack the entity, which I love that because he's still Kirk.
Yeah, exactly.
And Spock says, that would be pointless, you moron.
Did you see what it did to, everybody else so far?
So he says, there is one possibility, but I cannot guarantee its success. We could attempt to find some humpback whales. And Kirk says, Spock, start your computations for time warp. Talk about a leap.
Oh, yeah. And the whole time warp thing. I mean, I love time travel stuff, but why wouldn't they do this all the time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, think of all the things they could fix.
Yeah, they could keep Kirk from having many children.
Go back in time and give him a vasectomy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a whole movie they never thought of. And Spock tells him that he's computed everything from memory.
I'm not sure I would trust that.
Yeah, again, being that his memory was stored in McCoy's brain for a while.
Yep, addled by lots of alcohol.
Yeah, it would make me have questions. So Sulu counts off. He's like, warp 2, 3, warp 4.
I found that annoying, Dana, really. I mean, I don't find what you're saying annoying, but I found what Sulu was saying annoying.
Yeah, I got that part.
Okay, good.
Or at least I was hoping that's what it was. So as they go around the sun, we kind of like get this like zoom in on Kirk, and then we get all these like weird statue figures of the crew kind of popping up and rolling, and then there's like somebody like dove into water, and we're seeing the air bubbles, and
It's very weird, Dana.
I have questions. So anyway, so then they come back around and they see Earth, and they determine that there's whale song, and Uhura says, but it's coming from San Francisco. And Scotty reports the Klingon crystals are decrystallizing. If we don't fix it, we'll be stuck here forever.
Well, here we go. You know, the clock is ticking, right? We got to fix these crystals, never to return to our own time.
Spock tells Kirk that there may be a way to recharge the crystals. He says nuclear energy was used at this time in the world. And he says Navy vessels of the era were powered by nuclear energy.
But why Navy ships? I mean, there were nuclear reactors that probably, had a lot more of whatever they needed.
Yeah, but in 1986, did they have any in the U.S., like in San Francisco? No, they would have to go to like Paris or someplace. And so...
Well, they could have gone to 3 Mile Island. Oh, maybe that's what caused the problem at 3 Mile Island. It was actually the Enterprise.
Didn't think about that, yeah. So they land in Golden Gate Park.
Yeah, but hold on. I got a question. Hold on. I got a question about that. What if someone was just in the park, and they're just jogging through the park the next morning, and couldn't they just run into this cloaked ship? I mean, cloaking just means people can't see it. Like they would just bang into it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's in San Francisco. There's got to be like a ton of people in that park.
Kirk says they'll split up into teams to achieve their goals, and he reminds everybody they have to go incognito. Everyone looks at Spock, and he kind of looks back at him, and then he reaches inside of his robe that he's wearing, tears off a piece, and ties it around his head.
I thought he was tearing off a piece of his underwear. I mean, what was he doing? His hands were inside of his robe, Dana, and there's this big tearing sound,
Maybe there's extra material inside the robe, and and he was like, man, this has been bothering me for a long time. I've been meaning to tear it off anyway, so...
Why is he wearing that robe, Dana?
He apologized for not being in uniform when he came on the ship. That's the only uniform, the only thing he had was that robe.
I mean, they don't have like some spare uniform on the planet of some kind, just some regular clothes. I mean, just give him a pair of pants and a shirt. It doesn't have to be the uniform.
I don't know. I mean, he wore that robe when they restored his brain, and he's just been wearing it ever since. I would think it's starting to get smelly, actually.
In the Wrath of Khan at the end, where he dies, inside that like chamber that has all the radiation, maybe his clothes are so irradiated, and he's just shat himself. He just William Shatnered himself all over the place.
But they're no longer on the Enterprise.
No, I know, but I guess what I'm saying is they probably threw his clothes away at that point.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a spare Klingon uniform he could wear. That would be interesting.
That would have been quite interesting, yeah.
Talk about smell. Oof.
Those guys don't bathe. So downtown San Francisco, Kirk almost gets run over by a cab, and the cab driver calls him a dumbass, and Kirk goes, well, double dumbass on you. And Kirk and Spock see a sign for humpback whales. Kirk is like, we've got to go to this institute. And Chekhov and Uhura start asking a police officer how to get to the nuclear vessels in Alameda. Can you tell me where the nuclear vessel is? And
I mean, it was kind of funny. But Dana, Kirk tells him, take off the insignias from your uniforms, right? But they still look like they're wearing a uniform, or that it's some weird dress-up convention they're in town for, or who knows,
McCoy's wearing a kind of leather outfit.
Oh, so was Chekhov. He was in a complete leather pants, leather jacket.
Yeah, and Sulu's got a cape.
Yeah, he's got a cape. He's got a freaking cape. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
He's got a freaking cape.
So Kirk and Spock finally get on a bus, and there's this punk rocker with a boombox, and this is the classic scene of all Star Trek movies. And he's listening to this obnoxious music while Kirk and Spock are sitting there, and Kirk keeps asking him to stop that noise, and the guy like flips him off. And Spock just reaches across and like does the Vulcan nerve pinch on the guy, and the guy passes out onto his boombox and shuts it off. And everybody on the bus claps for him.
It was a classic scene, yeah.
Kirk and Spock arrive at the Ocean Institute. The guide comes out. Her name is Gillian Taylor, and she's talking about the whales and how great they are. And then they see videos of the whales being hunted.
Dana, I once had a beer that was made of whale testicles.
Why?
Well, see, I was in Iceland, and Iceland still allows whale harvesting. So one of the breweries there gets the whale testicles from the whalers, and then they smoke the whale testicles over sheep's dung, and then they put the smoked testicles in the beer as they're brewing the beer.
Okay, I'm trying not to throw up. Go ahead.
And it just tastes kind of like a smoky beer, you know? I mean, when I was drinking it, I had a ball.
My dad, too.
Never know. I wonder if it was a sperm whale. The weird part is, Dana, they can't export that beer to the European Union because they don't allow anything with whale products in it. And so when they make that beer to export to the European Union, they use sheep testicles, or ram testicles, I should say, and they smoke the ram testicles over sheep's dung, and they make the beer that way.
And they really export this.
Yeah, I mean, the brewery has since gone out of business, oddly enough, but
yeah.
it was around when I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, after that exciting story.
Well, it kind of fit with the video that they're showing in the Institute carving up the whales and stuff, you know?
Yeah. After they watch these videos, she takes them down to the whale pen.
Oh, well, hold on a second, though. I forgot to bring this part up. Some goober in the tour, right, asks, are any of these whales dangerous? Like, do they eat people? And she's like, no, they don't. Yes, they do. The freaking orca, that will eat you without thinking twice about it.
So as they're watching the whales in this viewing area, Kirk's like looking around and he realizes Spock's not there. All of a sudden, Spock suddenly appears in the tank with the whales. And Kirk's reaction is awesome. And Spock then appears to be doing a mind meld with one of the whales.
Oh, that's what he was doing. Okay.
Gillian, the tour guide, like flips out and she runs back up the stairs. And just as Spock's getting out of the water and putting his robe back on,
he had some weird gray underwear, though, Dana. It was dirty. When he was swimming, he had a shirt on and that like weird gray, it almost looked like a loincloth of some kind.
I tell you, he hadn't showered. So, I mean, it's just been wearing the same robe for a while.
Maybe it's a pair of underwear that Klingons would have been wearing. And he's like, oh, maybe I can wear these.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
No, and the Klingons don't ever wash their own underwear. They just take it off, put it back in the drawer. So she runs up and starts yelling at Spock, and she says that they have to get out of there, or she'll call the cops. And so then next we go to Chekhov and Uhura as they find a nuclear vessel. It's the Enterprise. So the next thing we see is Kirk and Spock kind of walking along, and then Gillian pulls up in a pickup truck, and Kirk tries to explain Spock's odd behavior by saying, oh, my friend was at Berkeley in the 60s and did too much LDS.
Well, how would he even know about Berkeley? You know?
He's a historian guy. He likes history.
That's true, yeah.
For some reason, she offers them a ride, and they accept.
I would have been hitting that gas faster than anything.
Yeah, maybe driving towards them.
Double dumbass on you, you bastard.
Kirk offers to take the whales away so they'll never be hunted.
Except for their testicles and for some beer that I'm thinking about making in the future.
Kirk gets a call on the communicator. Scotty says something about the ready to beam him in or something. And so after his brief discussion with Scotty, he tells Gillian that he's from the future and he has plans to repopulate the humpback whales in that time.
She's like, now you're going to repopulate them? Or how does this actually work in the future?
Back to the naval base in the USS Enterprise, Chekhov and Uhura locate the reactor and attach this device to take the photons out. So on the vessel, a crewman there sees that there is a power drain, and they quickly identify that there's an intruder on the ship. And of course, Uhura and Chekhov call, and Scotty says he can only get one transport out at a time. So she beams out. So Chekhov, he ends up running away, and they're chasing him, and it's like pretty extensive run. He ends up falling off the ship and lands apparently badly. And so then you see him down on the dock, and they're like, call an ambulance. At the Ocean Institute, Jillian goes in and she learns the whales have already been taken away. So the guy that tells her is like, oh, we thought it'd be best, no media coverage. And then she like slaps him and runs away.
Oh, she totally Mabinga'd that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, hit him hard. Maybe that's the whole start of the Mabinga thing. As we're going to find out, she kind of goes into the future. I guess I can throw that out there, right? Can I throw that out there? Is that a spoiler?
Yes, it's a spoiler.
Okay. So she goes into the future. And maybe she meets Mabinga or something. And she's like, oh, yeah, this one guy, he tried to take my whales away from me, and I just smacked the shit out of him.
And Mabinga's like, you mean like this? And they keep slapping each other. It's like, yeah. No, it's more like this. So Jillian like takes off, and she hurries back to where she left Kirk.
In the park. She's in the park now.
And as she's pulling in, she sees Sulu in a helicopter dropping the transparent aluminum into the ship, and Scotty's out the top, but obviously you can't see the ship. And then she goes running towards where they are, and she's going, Admiral Kirk, and she's yelling, and then she runs right into the cloaked ship.
It's awesome. Just face plants into the thing.
Well, it would have been funny if they pulled back and you saw like a bunch of people like you were talking about, like, the runners in the park and the cyclists and stuff.
A couple of dogs like peeing on it.
Yeah. So Kirk beams her aboard. And when she comes aboard, he says, well, hello, Alice.
She's like, is this what happens to all the women you meet? You call them a different name?
He says, hello, Alice. Welcome to Wonderland.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, I forgot about that. Hey, hold on a second. Where did Sulu learn how to fly a freaking ancient helicopter?
He said that he had trained in one or something like that at when he was at the academy.
No. I mean, it'd be like someone training on the freaking Wright Brothers plane, right? Yeah, I'm gonna learn how to fly just in case, Dana. Just in case I find myself back in time. I'm going to know how to fly this thing. You know what I mean? I think, was it Wilbur or Orville was the first fatality, plane fatality? One of those two. Died in a crash, I mean.
Did they really?
Yep, I'm pretty sure. Let me, I'm going to just type, did Orville, I typed in, did Orville Redenbacher die? Yeah, he fucking died. Yeah,
he was like dead when he was doing the commercials.
Okay. So Orville, just to make it clear, Orville Redenbacher is not related to Orville or Wilbur Wright. Not to either of them.
That's weird.
Wilbur Wright died. Let's see. What was the cause of Wilbur Wright's death? Neither of them died in a plane crash. That's a fucking lie. It's a lie, Dana.
That's why I didn't know about it.
Wilbur died of typhoid fever at the age of 45. Maybe he was on the plane and then died, and then the plane crashed.
Well, maybe the passenger next to him had typhoid fever, and that's where he got it. Then he basically died because of the plane.
And then Orville Wright, oddly enough, choked to death eating popcorn. Yeah, no, he didn't die of eating popcorn. That's a lie. He died. How did he die?
Boredom from listening to this podcast?
No, I gotta scroll. You know how long these Wikipedia pages are to go all the way to the bottom where the death happens?
Yeah.
Hold on, death. Orville. Jesus, Dana. Just tell me. Oh, here it is. So, Dana, Orville died at the age of 76 following his second heart attack.
First one when he realized that the plane was out of gas.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
So now that we learned about the Wright brothers and Orville Redenbacher.
So we learned about Orville Redenbacher dying along with Wilbur Wright on an airplane because they choked on popcorn. So everyone write that down in case it's on an exam.
People learned so much from this. We're not getting paid enough, Dan. So.
No, we're not. And if anyone would like to pay us to stop doing the podcast, I mean, I'd be okay with that, Dana. Like if someone said, "Hey, well, how much would it take, Dana, for you to stop doing the podcast?" Although we might not want to tell people because then we lose the power of negotiation.
Yeah, that's it. I don't want to lose the power of negotiation.
Okay. All right. Maybe we should move on to this thing.
I've been trying to for like 10 minutes. So so now I got to recap everything like they did during the series and say,
She just ran into the ship and he beamed her aboard, I think is where we were.
So then Kirk learns that Chekhov is being taken to a hospital and Uhura reports he's injured and not expected to survive.
Wow.
So Kirk, McCoy, and Jillian go to the hospital and they are wearing medical garb. And they see this guy pushing the gurney and Kirk takes it away from him. They put Jillian on the gurney and they cover her up and they take her to the floor where Chekhov is. There's 2 guards standing in front of the door. So the guards step aside and they go in and the doctor's like, what are you doing in here? Where's your mask? And you can see they're getting ready to like drill holes in Chekhov's head.
Yeah.
McCoy puts something on Chekhov's head and says, we're dealing with medievalism here. Chekhov slowly wakes. And so then they, wheel Chekhov out. They go running off through the corridors and the cops are chasing them. And
it was a whole kind of Keystone Cop kind of thing, right? They're kind of sliding through the corridors, pushing the gurney, and the cops are, tripping over themselves and everything. So
yeah, it's a little Three Stooges like.
Yeah, Three Stooges, yeah.
And so then just as they're getting ready to get on an elevator, you can see Kirk use the communicator and call Scotty. And we see everybody is beamed to the park. So they're standing outside. Kirk's like, well, this is where I have to leave you. And just as he goes to beam up, she jumps on him. And so they beam up together.
So he was just going to leave her there.
Yeah.
Knowledge of the future.
A lot of knowledge of the future. And so then she gives him the radio frequency so they can track the whales. So they say that the whales are off the coast of Alaska. So they find the whales are already being hunted by a whaling ship. And then best shot of the movie, the Klingon bird of prey decloaks.
Yeah.
And we see it over this whaling ship. And the guys are like, what the and they're like trying to turn the wheel as fast as they can. This one guy's like spinning the wheels like they're doing circles. And everybody else is like running off the deck and stuff. And so that was really great.
That was fun.
So then Scotty beams up the whales and he calls to Kirk and says, Admiral, there'll be whales here.
That's another great line.
So then they say they're going to go and circle the sun again, and they're heading towards it.
The question I have for you, if they did the slingshot thing to go back in time, okay, since you understand the physics of this, they're doing the exact same thing. How is it that they're going to go forward in time now, Dana?
Because when they slingshot at a different speed and they break the sound barrier, and then all of a sudden they're there.
I never understood the physics of that, so thank you for explaining it.
Yeah. The sun is a lot of gravity.
Okay. So this is what we've learned tonight, Dan. Let's see if we can recap. We've got something about smoking whale testicles in here. We learned that Orville Wright and Orville Redenbacher died in a plane crash. Something to do with popcorn. And that the sun has a lot of gravity. Those are like the key takeaways from tonight.
Yeah, I feel smarter.
Yeah, sure.
And when they went around the sun, did they go around the same way?
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe they went the other direction and somehow that propels them the other way in time.
Everybody knows you go right to left around the sun, you go in the past, you go left to right, and you come out into the future.
That's totally it. That's absolutely it.
Basic physics, Dan. That's
basic. Okay, so let's add time travel. We figured out time travel. It's a list of things we learned tonight.
Yeah. So next thing, they are back, and they just missed the Golden Gate Bridge, and they go into the water, and the ship starts to sink.
I was like, man, Captain Sully's flying that thing. Get that thing, nice water landing. Maybe Sue was like, I remember reading about this Captain Sully guy.
The ship starts to sink, and the whales haven't been released yet. So Kirk goes down to where the whales are, and Scotty and Jillian appear to be trapped inside. And he asks Scotty where the release hatch is, and Scotty says, it's underwater. And he says, it's all the way back at the back of the boat. So,
why don't you go? You go open it. And, what accent is that? I don't even know now.
It's like Chekhov met Scotty, met some Finlander or something.
Oh God, I can't do it. I just can't do it.
Hey, that's some good whale meat there, don't you know?
Make sure to save the testicles, yeah.
Kirk dives in and he finds the latch, and of course it's difficult to open. Finally gets the latch pulled, and the whales are released.
Yeah.
And so the whales go into this like vertical position, and then the alien ship goes into this vertical position as well. They repeat the whale song, and then the ball goes back up inside because it was cold up there in space. And
It was a blue ball too, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
the ship turns around and leaves, and the crew cheers and laughs, and they all jump in the water, not afraid of the great white sharks that are out there to get them. And
Yeah, because they didn't say anything about those being extinct.
later at the council, Kirk and crew come in as the accused, and Spock is with them. And the Federation president says, "You're not charged." And Spock says he stands with his shipmates. And the president says all charges are dropped but one. Disobeying a superior officer is directed at Admiral Kirk. Because of this, he is demoted to captain, and that as a consequence of your new rank, you will be given the duties for which you have repeatedly demonstrated unswerving ability, the command of a starship. So then Kirk finds Jillian, and she says she's going on her ship, and she says it's not goodbye, and Kirk asks, "How will I find you?" And she hugs him and kisses him on the cheek, and she says, "I'll find you." So then we have a scene with Sarek saying goodbye to Spock, and Sarek says, "As I recall, I opposed your enlistment in Starfleet. It is possible that judgment was incorrect."
Yeah, no crap, Dad. This is what I told you back then.
And Sarek says, "Yes, of course." Then he says, "Do you have a message for your mother?" And Spock says, "Yes. Tell her to leave your fat ass and get off that godforsaken rock that you guys live on." So the next thing we see is the crew in a shuttlecraft, and they're going in the space station, and they talk about what ship they'll get, and somebody's like, "Oh, we'll get an old freighter," and then they pass by the Excelsior, and Sulu's like, "Oh, maybe we'll get the Excelsior."
Scotty looked like he was about to Mabinga Sulu for that. He didn't want the Excelsior.
So then they pass over the Excelsior, and they see the new Enterprise, NCC 1701A. And Kirk says, "My friends, we've come home." And so the next thing we see is everybody's on the bridge of the Enterprise, and they say they're ready to go. And Kirk says, "Let's see what she's got." And they take off, and the music starts up, and Dan, that's how the movie ends.
Dana, you have some information about this film you want to share with us.
Yeah, Dan, I wanted to start off with Catherine Hicks, who played Jillian. She has a long list of acting credits from TV to film, with such films as Peggy Sue Got Married, Child's Play, Garbo Talks, and The Razor's Edge, and TV credits including the Bad News Bears series. She played Marilyn Monroe in the 1980 TV movie Marilyn, the Untold Story. And she admitted she never watched Star Trek, the original series, before signing on to play Jillian in the movie. And Dan, her birthday is coming up on August 6th, and she'll be 73. Yes, she is still alive.
Damn, Dana, we could get her on.
Yeah. So the film features the only instance in which Kirk says, "Scotty, beam me up." Dan, also the captain of the USS Saratoga, seen in the film's beginning, that was the first female captain ever seen in a Star Trek story. Dan, I found this especially interesting. During the final courtroom scene, there's one shot of the crew filing in as the entire main TOS cast is in it. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Chekhov, and Sulu are entering the room, and Rand and Chapel are visible in the audience behind them. This is the only shot in the entire franchise in which all these characters are on the screen at the same time. So, Dan, do you have some more information for us about this episode?
Yeah, Dana. One thing I found pretty interesting, Dana, was the character of Dr. Taylor, who in the film was Jillian Taylor, was originally cast as a male character who was a wacky college professor and a UFO nut. Actor Eddie Murphy was offered the role. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that would have been completely different.
He decided, however, to appear in the film The Golden Child, a decision he later admits was a big mistake. And then Catherine Hicks won the rewritten and revised role.
I think it turned out better.
And then earlier drafts of the script had Saavik remaining on Vulcan due to her, get this, Dana, being pregnant, not with Kirk's child, but with Spock's child.
Well, there's a lot of pon farring going on the Genesis planet.
But I'm pretty sure, Dana, we not only implied that, but I'm pretty sure we said it outright.
So we were ahead, is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally ahead. And then finally, Dana, at the beginning of the film, there is a slide on the screen that says the film is dedicated to the men and women of the spaceship Challenger. And that had exploded shortly after liftoff on January 28th, 1986, about 10 months before the release of Star Trek IV. So, Dana, what do you have as a theme or dilemma for this episode?
I might be reaching, Dan, but I have rectifying old sins. Not only does the crew save the planet by bringing humpback whales into the 23rd century, taking care of the sins of the forefathers, but the crew itself has to answer for its past behavior. By being heroes, that's how they basically save themselves. How about you? Do you have a theme or dilemma for us?
What are the long-term and maybe unintended consequences of human-caused species extinction? And I actually see this film in some ways as being a message film. Part of that message is, what are we doing to our own planet, and what will be those consequences in the future?
Dan, why don't you share with us what you think is the best part of this movie?
First off, the premise is absolutely ridiculous. However, I think the film executes perfectly. You know, the comic chops of the actors is pretty evident. And the whole whale thing, I mean, if you really think about it, kind of stupid. But we get over that really quickly, and the crew just kind of moves us past all that, and then we're just into it. Like, we're into them in San Francisco. The weird, funny stuff is happening. That's what I thought was one of the best parts of the film, Dana. How about for you?
Similar. You know, it's a good story. It's fun. I think it was a well-rounded script. It made it really enjoyable to watch. Do you have another best part for us, Dan?
This kind of goes with my previous one, but the funny lines when the crew is stuck in the 21st century, especially Kirk and Spock, who kind of get used to swearing, you know, the double dumbass to you. I thought that was a great one. And then Spock is putting like damn in front of every sentence he's using for a while in the film. So I thought that was really well written and really funny. How about another best part for you?
Spock, once again, has a story arc. Through this episode, he grows, becomes a little bit more human. And so I thought that was really good how they worked that in. So, Dan, we covered the best. There's got to be some worst out there. Do you have any worst parts for us?
Dana, the aliens during the hearing at the end of the film, I thought that looked really fake. I think it's once again one of these kind of leftover effects almost of Star Wars, where they're trying to put in weird looking aliens that we've never really seen before in any of the episodes. I just thought they were dumb looking, Dana. How about a worst part for you?
Dan, for all the humor in it and stuff, they couldn't help it, but sometimes it got pretty cheesy. Started bothering me a little bit as the movie went on. And again, when you're watching it and you're kind of doing more of a review of it, some of these things stand out more than usual. So it bothered me this time. Do you have another worst part?
Doesn't bringing Jillian to the 23rd century kind of mess up a timeline somewhere, Dana? I mean, it just seems like something bad's going to happen. You just can't mess with time that way. What about another worst part for you?
It bothered me. Chekhov gets captured. They have his communicator. They have his ID, the phaser. He told him he's from Starfleet. This is, violation of the Prime Directive.
Well, Dana, maybe that's how Starfleet ends up in San Francisco in the future, that they've got all this stuff. It's in San Francisco, and then they save it. Gene Roddenberry gets a hold of it somehow, and then there you go. It's real, and it's going to be real now in the future.
Yeah.
Dana, how about another worst part for you?
The hospital scene, Dan, with the chase, like you said, Keystone Cops. Seems like it had all been done before. It goes along with that cheesy one that I said at the beginning. So it kind of bothered me that they went there, but at the same time, it was fun.
Dana, tell us about what happened on this date in history.
This movie aired in the U.S. on November 26, 1986. The number one song in the U.S. was You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi. And in the UK, The number one song was Take My Breath Away. It was the love theme from Top Gun by Berlin. Also on this day, the trial begins in Israel for John Demjanjuk, accused of being a Nazi prison guard, Ivan the Terrible, at Treblinka concentration camp. Let's see, Iran-Contra affair. Might remember, President Reagan announced the members of what will become known as the Tower Commission. The commission was tasked with reviewing the proper role of the National Security Council staff in national security operations generally and in the arms transfers to Iran specifically. Also, Dan, a new era in communication was nearing as AT&T's engineers installed the first transatlantic underwater fiber optic cable. When completed in 1988, it would stretch 3,600 nautical miles.
That still blows me away, Dana.
And Dan, finally, I kind of touched on some of this stuff last week, so I thought I'd bring it back. In November of 1986, gas cost 86 cents a gallon. That's up 5 cents from 84. A 2-liter bottle of Pepsi was 89 cents, so that was more than a gallon of gas.
Probably better if you drink gas, too.
Yeah. But a regular-sized Hershey bar was 40 cents, and a Big Mac meal was $2.60, and a new car was between $9,600 and $15,000. And finally, a new home in the U.S. averaged about $112,000. So, Dan, what are your final thoughts on this movie?
Dana, to me, this movie was kind of like cotton candy. You know, you're eating it, it's kind of good, it's sugary, and then you're done with the cotton candy and it's gone. You forget about it. That's kind of my thought. What do you think, Dana?
Dan, I remember when I saw this and I thought it was great that they had the humor and stuff, and I've seen this a few times over the years. Watching it again this time, I like this movie, but I don't love it. And I thought I was really going to love it. But at times it feels like the cast was thrown into a sitcom. And I know what they were trying to do. And I thought they did actually a good job of putting this story together, but not as great as I thought it was.
Well, what do we got coming up next week? It's a really good one, right, Dana?
Yeah, it's the the infamous Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Oh, I think I'm going to have to rent this one, Dana. I'm not sure I'm up for that. Well, Dana, once again, great talking with you about this film. I love getting together every week and doing this.
Yeah, Dan, like I say every week, it's always great to sit down with you and talk about Star Trek. I mean, just anything Star Trek is fun, and we have a good time with this. Hope that our listeners are enjoying what we're doing. If you are, please tell your friends. In the meantime, until we meet again, live long and prosper.
Thanks once again for listening to Damn It Jim, the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at dammitjimpodcast@gmail.com or join the discussion on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or X. You can also call the Damn It Jim hotline at 509-676-6298. Enjoy the rest of your week, and as always, remember to live long and prosper. This has been a Ramble Jar production.